The morning rush at River's Edge Café had swallowed every available seat. Sarah Wilson pressed against her corner table, fingers gripping a cracked coffee mug like a lifeline. Budget sheets sprawled before her, red ink everywhere, calculations that never added up. Her art program hung by a thread, and she was running out of miracles. A stranger approached through the maze of occupied tables, hesitant steps, worn flannel that had seen better days, work boots with honest scuffs, but his hands told a different story. Manicured, soft, unblemished by real labor. The child's backpack on his shoulder seemed oddly expensive for someone dressed so plainly. Sarah barely lifted her eyes as he gestured toward the empty chair. "Mind if I sit?" His voice carried an educated tone that didn't match his appearance. She nodded absently, too exhausted to notice the contradiction standing right in front of her. Little did Sarah know she had just invited her future to sit down. The man settled into the chair with careful movements, as if he wasn't quite used to sharing space with strangers. Sarah stole glances while pretending to focus on her paperwork. He ordered black coffee and waited without checking his phone, unusual in a world where everyone seemed permanently attached to screens. His presence felt oddly calming in the chaos of morning rush hour. Outside, autumn rain drummed against the cafe windows, turning Willow Creek's Main Street into a watercolor painting. Sarah had moved to this small Oregon town 5 years ago, drawn by its promise of community and the chance to make a real difference in young lives. Her laptop screen glowed with spreadsheets that painted a grim picture. The school district needed to cut $200,000 from their budget. Art, music, and drama programs topped the chopping block. Sarah had spent weeks crafting proposals, researching grants, even considering dipping into her meager savings. Nothing seemed enough to save what her students needed most. "Rough morning?" The stranger's voice cut through her spiral of worry. Sarah looked up, surprised by the genuine concern in his dark eyes. "Just trying to save something that matters," she replied, gesturing at her laptop. "Sometimes the most important things are the first to go when money gets tight." The stranger nodded slowly, as if he understood more than she expected. "I've learned that the things worth saving usually require someone willing to fight for them, even when the odds seem impossible." There was weight behind his words, the kind that came from personal experience rather than empty platitudes. A small commotion near the door drew their attention. A yellow school bus had pulled up outside, and children were pressing their faces against the cafe windows. "Snow day shelter," Sarah explained. "The elementary school's heating system failed again." As the children filed in, the stranger's attention focused on one particular boy. 7 or 8 years old, quiet while the others bubbled with excitement. The child moved differently, more carefully, his eyes taking in every detail with intense focus. The transformation in the stranger was subtle but unmistakable. Tension melted from his shoulders. For just a moment, the careful mask of polite distance slipped, revealing something raw and protective underneath. Then, the moment passed, but Sarah filed away what she'd witnessed. In a town the size of Willow Creek, such reactions meant connection. Mrs. Peterson, the cafe owner, appeared with fresh coffee. "Sarah, honey, how's the budget battle going?" The older woman had owned River's Edge for 15 years and knew everyone's business. "Still fighting the good fight, Dot," Sarah replied with a tired smile. "You're new around here," Dot said to the stranger. "Just passing through or thinking about staying?" Her question carried protective curiosity that every small town deployed when strangers appeared. "Staying," he answered simply. "My son and I moved here a few months ago. We're still getting used to the pace." The revelation explained his reaction to the boy by the window. "What brought you to Willow Creek?" Sarah asked. "My wife used to paint," he said after a moment. "She always talked about finding a place where art mattered as much as anything else. When I saw the job posting for the high school's art teacher position, I thought maybe she'd been pointing us toward someone like you." The past tense hit Sarah like a cold wind. Used to paint, had been pointing. Before she could respond, chaos erupted at the children's table. One of the boys had knocked over his hot chocolate. The quiet boy Sarah had noticed sprang into action, grabbing napkins and directing cleanup with mature efficiency. The stranger was on his feet immediately, crossing the cafe to help. "Easy there, buddy. Accidents happen. Let's just take care of it." Watching them work together, Sarah realized she was witnessing a family dynamic. The quiet boy was his child. Their similar mannerisms, the way they moved in sync, made perfect sense. "Ethan's good in situations like that," the stranger said, returning to their table. "He's had practice." Sarah filed away the name and the implication. "He seems like a thoughtful kid, different from most 7-year-olds I meet." "He sees things differently than other kids," the stranger explained. "Autism spectrum, high functioning. Most people don't understand that different doesn't mean less capable." The protective edge in his voice was unmistakable. Sarah nodded, thinking of her own students who struggled to fit conventional molds. "In my experience, the kids who see the world differently often create the most beautiful art." For the first time since he'd sat down, the stranger's smile reached his eyes. "Lily, my wife, used to say exactly that. She believed creativity was just another language, and some people are naturally bilingual." The easy way he spoke his wife's name suggested healing rather than fresh grief. Time had softened the sharp edges of loss into something he could carry without bleeding. As the morning thinned, Ethan remained at the children's table, quietly sketching in a small notebook. Every few minutes he would glance toward his father, a silent check-in that spoke of close bond. "What does he like to draw?" Sarah asked. "Everything," came the immediate reply. "But especially things that other people miss, details that make familiar things look new." The pride in his voice was unmistakable. Ethan approached their table with shy formality, offering a torn page to Sarah. "For the art teacher," he said quietly. "Dad told me you help kids make beautiful things." Sarah accepted the drawing with reverence. What she saw made her breath catch. Ethan had drawn the cafe scene from memory, but with details she hadn't noticed, the way light would slant through windows. Her own hands wrapped around her coffee mug, captured with startling accuracy and surprising gentleness. "This is incredible, Ethan," she said, meaning every word. "You see things I miss, even when I'm looking right at them." The boy's smile transformed his serious face. "Mom used to say that pictures can tell secrets that words can't say out loud," he said matter-of-factly. "She taught me to look for the secrets." The simple statement carried profound understanding of art's deeper purpose. The comfortable moment was interrupted by Sarah's phone buzzing. Her principal's number appeared and her stomach clenched. "I should take this," she apologized, stepping away. "Sarah, I need you to come in early tomorrow." Principal Morrison's voice carried unwelcome news. "The district superintendent wants to discuss the arts budget. They've made some decisions." The euphemistic phrasing couldn't disguise reality. "How bad is it, Jim?" she asked. "They're cutting the entire arts budget," he said quietly. "Music, drama, visual arts, everything goes at the end of this semester. I'm sorry, Sarah." The words hit like physical blows. End of semester meant 6 weeks. 6 weeks to wrap up years of work, to say goodbye to students who needed art like oxygen. When she returned to the table, her face must have telegraphed the news. "Bad news?" the stranger asked gently. "They're cutting the arts program," she said flatly. "End of semester. Apparently creativity doesn't test well enough to justify the expense." Ethan looked up with keen sensitivity. "No more art classes?" he asked quietly. The simple question nearly undid Sarah's composure. The stranger's reaction was immediate. His hands clenched briefly before he forced them to relax. "How much?" he asked quietly. "To save the program. What would it take?" Sarah almost laughed at the impossibility. $200,000. Might as well be $2 million. "That's not as impossible as it sounds," the stranger said carefully. "Sometimes solutions appear when you least expect them." Before he could explain, the cafe door chimed and a woman in an expensive coat entered, scanning the room with focused intensity. Her gaze locked onto their table. "There you are," she said, approaching with confident stride. "The board meeting was moved up to this afternoon. You need to sign these documents immediately." She placed a leather portfolio on the table between Sarah's budget sheets and Ethan's art supplies. The stranger looked at the woman with barely concealed annoyance. "Not now, Jennifer. Can't this wait?" The woman's laugh held no humor. "Michael, you own a multi-billion-dollar company. Nothing waits for coffee dates." The words hung in the air like smoke from an explosion, reshaping everything Sarah thought she knew about her morning companion, Michael. Multi-billion-dollar company. The pieces clicked with devastating clarity. She'd been sharing her financial struggles with someone who could solve them without noticing the expense. The careful way he'd dressed down suddenly felt like elaborate deception. "You own a company?" Sarah's voice came out smaller than intended. Michael's expression shifted to panic mixed with regret. "Sarah, I can explain." But she was already gathering her papers with shaking hands. The humiliation burned hotter than anger. All morning she'd been pouring out her heart about budget struggles to someone who could buy her entire school district on a whim. "I need to go," she said, shoving her laptop into its case. Ethan watched the tension with wide eyes. "Did I do something wrong?" he asked his father, voice carefully modulated by a child who'd learned to monitor adult emotions. "Please don't leave like this," Michael said, voice carrying genuine distress. "Let me explain why I didn't tell you immediately." But Sarah was already standing. "There's nothing to explain. You're entitled to your privacy. I just need to figure out how to tell my students that art class is ending." Jennifer watched with detached interest. "Michael, we really don't have time for this. The helicopter is waiting." "Helicopter?" "Of course." As Sarah headed for the door, Ethan's voice stopped her. "Wait, please." The 7-year-old approached with something in his hands. "You forgot your drawing." He held out the sketch he'd given her earlier. "I made it for you because Dad said you help kids who see things differently. Like me." His simple words carried more weight than any adult explanation. Sarah knelt to Ethan's level, accepting the drawing with hands that had stopped shaking. Whatever his father's deceptions, this child's gesture was genuine. "Thank you, Ethan. This means more to me than you know." Standing, she looked directly at Michael. "Your son is a remarkable artist. I hope he finds teachers who recognize that." The words carried both blessing and goodbye. The week that followed passed in a blur of administrative meetings and farewell preparations. Sarah spent her days boxing up art supplies and having difficult conversations with students who couldn't understand why their sanctuary was being dismantled. She hadn't seen Michael or Ethan since that morning, though Mrs. Peterson mentioned they'd come in several times, always asking if she'd been by recently. On Friday afternoon, while packing her personal items from the art room, Sarah heard a soft knock. She turned to find Ethan standing in the entrance, holding a large piece of drawing paper. "Miss Sarah? Could I show you something?" His father was nowhere to be seen. "Of course, Ethan," she said. "What have you been working on?" When he turned the paper around, Sarah's breath caught. He'd drawn the cafe scene again, but from a different perspective. Instead of focusing on people and details, he'd captured the moment when 3 lives had intersected, the hope, the connection, and the shattering that followed. "I drew what I saw that day," Ethan explained matter-of-factly. "Dad was happy for the first time since Mom died. You were scared, but hoping for something good. And then the scary lady came and made everyone sad again." "This is beautiful, Ethan," Sarah said, kneeling to his level. "And very wise," the boy nodded solemnly. "Dad said I should ask you something, but only if I wanted to, and only if it felt right." His careful phrasing suggested a rehearsed but not scripted conversation. "What did you want to ask?" "Would you teach me to paint like Mom did? Dad found all her old art stuff, and he said maybe someone who understood about making beautiful things could show me how to use it properly." Before Sarah could respond, familiar footsteps echoed in the hallway. Michael appeared, looking uncertain but determined. "I hope it's okay that he came to find you. He's been working on that drawing all week." "The drawing's remarkable," Sarah said, standing but keeping distance. "He has a gift for seeing emotional truth in situations." Michael's expression softened. "Lily always said that Ethan could see feelings the way other people see colors." An awkward silence stretched. Finally, Michael spoke. "I owe you an explanation about the other day and an apology. I should have been honest from the beginning about who I am and why we moved here. I just wanted Ethan to have a chance at normal friendships, normal experiences." "I understand the impulse," Sarah said carefully, "but hiding that much money from someone struggling with budget cuts felt cruel, even if that wasn't your intention." Michael winced, but didn't argue. "You're right. It was thoughtless at best. I'm not used to thinking about how wealth affects other people because I spend most of my time around people who have similar resources." The honest admission revealed more about his isolated world than he probably intended. "What exactly do you do?" Sarah asked. "Artificial intelligence," Michael said simply. "I founded a company that develops AI solutions for healthcare and education. We've been successful beyond anything I originally imagined." Sarah had heard of breakthrough AI companies that transformed industries overnight. The idea that she'd been sharing coffee with someone at the center of that revolution felt surreal. "And you moved to Willow Creek because—" Michael's expression grew soft as he looked at his son. "Because Lily made me promise that if anything happened to her, I'd make sure Ethan grew up somewhere that valued creativity as much as achievement. She was worried that my world would try to turn him into something he's not meant to be." Ethan, who'd been listening with characteristic patience, suddenly spoke up. "Are you going to keep teaching art, Miss Sarah, even if the school doesn't want you to anymore?" His question cut to the heart of everything Sarah had been wrestling with. "I don't know, Ethan," she answered honestly. "Dad could help," the boy said with straightforward logic. "He has lots of money and you need money to teach art. That seems easy to fix." Michael had been watching this exchange with growing intensity. Actually, Ethan might be onto something. What if there was a way to make this work that didn't involve the school district? Sarah looked at him suspiciously. "What are you thinking?" "A community art center," Michael said, enthusiasm building. "Independent of the school system, funded privately, focused on exactly the kind of work you're already doing." "That's a beautiful dream," Sarah said carefully. "But starting something like that would take enormous amounts of money, not to mention permits, staff, insurance." Michael's smile suggested he'd anticipated her concerns. "I've started companies from scratch before. The logistics are challenging, but not impossible. And as for funding," he shrugged as if massive financial investment was a minor detail. "I can't let you just bankroll my dreams because you feel guilty," Sarah said firmly. "What if it wasn't about guilt?" Michael asked quietly. "What if it was about building something that honors what Lily believed in, gives Ethan the kind of community he needs, and lets you do the work you're meant to do? You'd be doing me a favor as much as I'd be helping you." Sarah studied both of them, the quiet, gifted child, and the father who'd crossed the country to give his son belonging. "If we did this," she said slowly, "it would have to be a real partnership, not your project that I happen to run." "Of course," Michael agreed immediately. "I know how to build companies, but you know how to teach art. This only works if we each contribute what we do best." 3 months later, Sarah stood in what had once been an abandoned warehouse, watching contractors transform empty space into her dreams made manifest. Skylights flooded the main floor with natural light perfect for painting. Smaller rooms were being fitted with kilns, easels, and equipment that would have made her old high school weep with envy. Michael moved through the construction chaos with practiced confidence, consulting blueprints and making decisions with efficiency born of experience. Ethan sat cross-legged in what would become the main studio, sketching the construction work with focused intensity. His drawings had become a visual record of the center's creation, capturing not just physical transformation, but the excitement and hope that infused every corner. "Miss Sarah," he called out, "could you come see this?" He showed her a sketch that made her breath catch. Children of various ages engaged in different art forms, each face showing the focused joy that came from finding your medium of expression. "These are the kids you're hoping to meet here?" Sarah asked, settling beside him. Ethan nodded seriously. "Kids who don't fit in regular classes, kids who think differently, kids who need art to say what they can't say with words." His understanding of the center's mission was perfectly aligned with what Sarah hoped to achieve. Michael approached with coffee, navigating construction materials with surprising grace. "The electrical contractor wants to know if you need additional outlets in the ceramics room," he said. "Better to have too many than not enough," Sarah decided. The past months had been a whirlwind of planning sessions and equipment selection. "I still can't believe this is really happening." "Believe it," Michael said, settling on a nearby sawhorse. "In 6 weeks, you'll be teaching your first classes here, and unlike the school district, nobody can cut your budget or question whether art education is worth the investment." His satisfaction with that particular freedom was evident. 6 months later, on a crisp November morning, Sarah stood at the entrance of the Willow Creek Community Art Center watching the first group of students arrive. Children ranging from 6 to 18 approached with expressions mixing excitement, curiosity, and nervous anticipation. The diversity exceeded even her optimistic projections. Homeschooled kids, students from neighboring districts, and several young people whose careful movements suggested various physical or developmental differences. Ethan stood beside her, wearing a student ambassador name tag. "Miss Sarah," he said quietly, "some of the kids look scared. Should we do something to help them feel better?" "What do you think would help?" she asked. Ethan considered seriously. "Maybe if they could see that other kids like them are here too. Sometimes people feel better when they're not the only different one." The center's opening ceremony was deliberately low-key. Brief remarks, ribbon cutting performed by Ethan and the oldest student present, then immediate transition into hands-on activities. Within minutes, various studios buzzed with productive chaos as young people discovered new possibilities. In the main painting room, Sarah watched a shy girl with Down syndrome mix colors under Ethan's patient guidance. His natural teaching instincts had emerged immediately. Across the room, a teenager in a wheelchair worked at a specially designed easel. The adaptive equipment had been Michael's innovation, designed after consulting occupational therapists about removing barriers. The ceramics studio hummed with different energy as students discovered the tactile pleasure of clay. A hyperactive 10-year-old who'd struggled in traditional classrooms found unexpected calm at the pottery wheel. Michael appeared beside her with coffee, their established ritual. "Looks like organized chaos," he observed. "Exactly what we hoped for." The music room echoed with tentative melodies as students experimented with instruments many had never touched. A 12-year-old with autism played piano with startling sensitivity, while teenagers collaborated on lyrics that spoke to their experiences. During lunch break, Sarah sat with a mixed-age group listening to excited chatter about morning discoveries and afternoon plans. The natural mentorship dynamics amazed her, older students helping younger ones, experienced artists sharing techniques, shy children finding voices in supportive peer groups. "Miss Sarah," asked a 16-year-old, "are you going to offer summer programs too?" The question launched discussion about expanded programming that revealed how hungry these young people were for sustained artistic education. Ethan approached with his morning's portfolio. "Could I show everyone the drawing I made about today?" He carefully removed a sheet showing the center as a tree with deep roots and spreading branches, each branch ending in a figure engaged in creative activity. "The roots are all the people who helped make this place," he explained. "The trunk is the building where we learn, but the branches are what we take with us when we leave, all the art we make and the friends we meet." The metaphor was so apt that several teenagers applauded. Sarah felt tears threatening as she realized Ethan had captured something essential about their mission. The center wasn't just a place to make art, but a foundation for growth extending far beyond its walls. "That's exactly right, Ethan," she said softly. "You've drawn our hopes for what this place can become." As closing time approached, students cleaned workspaces with careful attention, understanding they were part of something special. "Same time tomorrow?" asked the shy girl who'd painted under Ethan's guidance. The hope in her voice made Sarah's heart ache with happiness. "Absolutely," she confirmed, "and bring any friends who might be interested. We have room for everyone." Michael stood near the entrance, personally thanking each departing student and parent. His genuine interest in their experiences revealed how much the project had come to mean beyond honoring his wife's memory. As the last family departed, Sarah, Michael, and Ethan found themselves alone in the center for the first time since completion. The quiet felt full of potential energy waiting to be released. "Your mom would be so proud," Sarah told Ethan, "of the center, of your artwork, of the way you helped other kids feel welcome today." The boy's smile was radiant. "I think she helped us find each other," he said simply, "so we could build something beautiful together." Michael's expression as he watched his son spoke volumes about his own healing journey. 1 year later, on a warm spring afternoon, Sarah stood in the center's sculpture garden watching students work on installations for their annual art show. The garden had become one of the most popular spaces, offering three-dimensional work and outdoor expression. Ethan, now 8 and serving as the youngest official teaching assistant, guided elementary students through creating a community mosaic. Remember, there's no wrong way to place your piece, he told a nervous 6-year-old. The beautiful thing about mosaics is that everything fits somewhere. His wisdom struck Sarah as she observed nearby. The center had become exactly what they'd envisioned, a place where every kind of artistic expression found proper context, where differences were celebrated, where creativity flourished without standardized constraints. Michael emerged carrying a wrapped object, expressions suggesting barely contained excitement. "Sarah, could you gather everyone for a minute? There's something I want to show you all." As students gathered around the garden's central fountain, Michael carefully revealed a bronze plaque mounted on polished stone. "This is something I commissioned for the center," he explained, turning it so everyone could read. Sarah read aloud. "The Willow Creek Community Arts Center, founded in memory of Lily Chen and in celebration of young artists who see the world differently. Dedicated to the belief that creativity is not a luxury, but a necessity, and that every child deserves the opportunity to discover their unique voice through artistic expression." Ethan approached with reverent attention, tracing his mother's name with gentle fingers. "She would love this place," he said quietly. "She always said that art was how people talk to each other across time and distance. Now, kids who never met her can learn from what she believed." The months that followed brought steady growth as word spread throughout the region. Students traveled from neighboring counties for programs unavailable elsewhere. The center's success attracted attention from arts education organizations wanting to replicate their model. The difference wasn't just money, Sarah knew. It was about believing that creativity mattered as much as any other subject. When students felt their artistic development was taken seriously, they rose to meet those expectations. As summer approached, they prepared for their most ambitious project, a community-wide arts festival showcasing student work while raising scholarship funds to ensure financial barriers never prevented participation. The festival opening arrived with perfect weather and community excitement exceeding projections. Main Street transformed into an outdoor gallery where student artwork attracted crowds, ranging from proud families to curious tourists. The quality on display would have impressed visitors without knowing the artists' ages or challenges overcome. Michael stood beside Sarah watching festival goers examine collaborative murals. "Look at what they've accomplished," he said softly. "This is what happens when young people are given real opportunities to excel at something they care about." The festival's success validated everything they'd worked to achieve, but more importantly, represented sustainability and growth benefiting students for years to come. Community members now understood the value firsthand. Local businesses committed to ongoing sponsorship. As evening approached, Sarah found herself in the main studio surrounded by artwork, supplies, and lingering energy of creative accomplishment. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight belonged to celebrating how far they'd traveled from that morning of desperate budget calculations and administrative indifference. Ethan approached carrying a small wrapped package. "Miss Sarah," he said formally, "I made something for you. To say thank you for everything." He handed her a hand-bound sketchbook filled with his drawings from the past year. The cover bore an inscription: "For Miss Sarah, who teaches kids to see beautiful things everywhere." The sketchbook chronicled their shared journey from that first cafe meeting through construction to festival preparations. Each drawing captured not just visual details, but emotional moments, hope, uncertainty, gradual building of trust and partnership between three people who'd found their way to something greater than any could have accomplished alone. "This is the most thoughtful gift I've ever received," Sarah said, meaning every word. Michael watched with visible emotion. "You've given us both something we didn't know how to ask for," he said quietly. "A place where Ethan can be exactly who he is while learning to become everything he might be. That's worth more than any amount of money." As they prepared to lock up, Sarah took one last look around studios where so many young people had discovered new aspects of themselves through artistic exploration. Walking toward the parking lot, Sarah reflected on the unlikely chain of events that had brought them here. A chance encounter in a crowded cafe had evolved into partnership changing lives and building community in ways none had anticipated. Sometimes the most important journeys began with the simplest gestures, like offering a stranger a seat when all other chairs were taken. The drive home took her past River's Edge Café, where Mrs. Peterson was turning on lights for another day. Through the window, Sarah could see their old corner table where everything had started with budget sheets and desperate calculations that somehow led to abundance beyond wildest dreams. Perhaps the universe really did know what it was doing after all. At home, Sarah placed Ethan's sketchbook on her bedside table. The final drawing showed the three of them in the completed center, surrounded by students engaged in artistic activities. But what struck her most was how Ethan had drawn their faces, not just happy, but peaceful, content, complete. They'd found their way home to work that mattered, relationships that sustained them, and community that celebrated what made each person unique. The Willow Creek Community Arts Center continued to thrive, its bronze plaque serving as daily reminder that creativity, like love, multiplied when shared rather than diminished. And somewhere, in the mysterious space between memory and possibility, Lily's spirit rested easy, knowing her husband and son had found exactly where they belonged, in a place where art mattered, differences were celebrated, and beautiful things grew from the simplest acts of human kindness.
But the Steinway mocked him from the basement, its restoration nearly complete, waiting for Kate's return. The piano had been transformed under his care, new hammers installed, action regulated, strings replaced and tuned to perfect pitch. It was his finest work, a love letter written in wood and wire and ivory. But the intended recipient was gone, driven away by his fear and stubborn pride. November arrived early that year, bringing snow and bitter winds that matched Ryan's mood. He was loading boxes into his truck. They'd found a cheaper apartment across town when his phone rang. Lily's school. Emergency. Accident in the gymnasium. The words blurred together as panic flooded his system, memories of Rachel's final ambulance ride overwhelming his senses. The drive to the school passed in a haze of terror and desperate prayers. Not Lily. Please, not Lily. She was all he had left, the only good thing in his life that hadn't been touched by loss. The universe seemed determined to take everyone he loved, but surely it wouldn't be so cruel as to claim his daughter too. But the emergency wasn't Lily. It was Ryan himself. A maintenance ladder had collapsed while he was changing light bulbs in the gymnasium, sending him tumbling 12 feet to the hardwood floor. The impact had shattered his left wrist, the hand he used for delicate piano work. The surgeon's words echoed in his mind. Torn ligaments, possible nerve damage, uncertain prognosis for full recovery. Hospital rooms smelled of antiseptic and broken dreams. Ryan lay in the narrow bed, his left arm immobilized in a complex brace that looked like medieval torture device. Lily sat beside him, trying to be brave but clearly terrified. The school's insurance would cover medical bills, but his income had evaporated. How could he repair pianos with one functional hand? The questions multiplied like viruses, each one more terrifying than the last. Physical therapy would take months, with no guarantee of success. Even if he regained some function, the fine motor control required for piano work might never return. At 35, he faced the prospect of retraining for a new career. But what skills did he possess beyond music? "Daddy, are you going to be okay?" Lily asked, her voice small and worried. Ryan forced a smile despite the pain medication making his thoughts fuzzy. "I'll be fine, sweetheart. Daddy's tough, remember?" But privately, he wondered how they'd survive this latest blow. His savings account contained less than $500. Rent was due in 2 weeks. The mathematics of desperation had never been clearer. He was drifting in medicated sleep when familiar voices penetrated his consciousness. Kate's voice, and another woman's, professional, discussing liability issues and family services with bureaucratic efficiency. Ryan's eyes snapped open to find Kate standing beside his bed, her face etched with concern and something that looked like guilt. "What are you doing here?" Ryan whispered through the fog of painkillers. Kate's smile was fragile, uncertain. "Lily called me." she admitted. She found my number in your phone. She was scared. The revelation hit Ryan like a second fall. His daughter had reached out to Kate in crisis, despite everything that had happened between them. I've been talking to the hospital administration, Kate continued, her voice carefully neutral, and the school district, about your situation. Ryan's defensive walls began rebuilding themselves, brick by brick. I don't want your charity, he said, though the words lacked conviction. I'm not offering charity, Kate replied quietly. I'm offering truth. She sat down carefully, as if afraid he might flee despite his immobilized condition. I owe you honesty, she began, about who I am and why I came into your lives. Her story emerged slowly, each revelation more painful than the last. The inheritance she'd never wanted, the technology company passed down through generations of Morrisons, parents who'd died in a private plane crash when she was 25, leaving her heir to a fortune she'd never sought. I was supposed to be a music teacher, Kate said, her voice thick with old grief. That was my dream, helping children discover the joy of music. But suddenly I owned Morrison Tech, employed thousands of people, had responsibilities I'd never asked for. The weight of unwanted power had consumed her 20s, turning passion into obligation. The husband and son had come later, brief happiness before tragedy struck again. James was a classical violinist, Kate continued. We met at a charity concert, married within a year. Michael was born 2 years later, and for a while I thought I could have it all. Family, music, purpose. Her voice broke on their names. I was in a board meeting when the accident happened, Kate whispered. Some crisis with overseas manufacturing that seemed so important at the time. James was picking Michael up from violin lessons. A drunk driver ran a red light at 60 miles per hour. They died instantly. The guilt in her voice was so raw that Ryan forgot his own pain. I told myself their deaths were punishment for neglecting them. Kate continued. For choosing corporate responsibility over family time. So I threw myself into philanthropy, trying to buy forgiveness with foundation grants and educational initiatives. But money couldn't bring them back, couldn't fill the silence in my house. Ryan understood now why Kate had seemed so lost when they first met. She was running from grief, searching for meaning in other people's lives because her own felt empty. You came here to disappear, he said, and Kate nodded. I wanted to be someone else for a while, someone who mattered for reasons beyond net worth. But you do matter, Ryan said, surprising himself with the conviction in his voice. Look what you did for Lily. Look how happy you made her. Kate's tears fell freely now, years of suppressed emotion finally released. She made me happy too, she admitted. Both of you did. I remembered what it felt like to be needed for who I was, not what I owned. Their conversation was interrupted by Lily's return from the cafeteria, where a nurse had taken her for dinner. The little girl stopped short when she saw Kate, confusion and hope warring in her expression. Miss Kate, she said hesitantly. Are you really here? Kate knelt beside the child's chair, her expensive clothes wrinkling against the hospital floor. I'm here, Kate confirmed, reaching out to smooth Lily's hair. I heard you were scared, so I came. Lily threw her arms around Kate's neck, relief and joy pouring out in fresh tears. I thought you were gone forever, she sobbed. Like Mommy, I thought I made you mad. Kate held the child tight, her own tears falling into Lily's hair. You could never make me mad, Kate whispered. You're the brightest, sweetest girl in the world. I was just scared of how much I loved you and your daddy. The admission hung in the air like a bridge, spanning the distance created by pride and fear. Ryan felt his own walls crumbling as he watched Kate comfort his daughter. I have an idea, Kate said, pulling back to look at both of them. But first, I need you to understand something. Everything I'm about to offer comes from love, not pity, not guilt or charity or any other reason except that you're my family now, whether you want to be or not. Her proposal was impossible, too generous to be real. Kate had spent weeks researching opportunities, calling in favors, creating possibilities that didn't exist before. The Hartford Conservatory needed a music therapy coordinator, someone who understood both technical skills and human healing. The position came with faculty housing, excellent benefits, and a pipeline to graduate school for gifted children. The salary is modest by foundation standards, Kate explained, but comfortable for a family. And there's funding for Lily's education through college. Ryan's eyes widened. Why would they offer this to me? I'm just a piano repairman with a broken hand. Kate's smile was radiant. Because I'm endowing the program, and because you're exactly what they need, someone who's lived through loss and found beauty again. The opportunity was everything Ryan had dreamed of and thought lost forever. A chance to use music for healing, to help others navigate the grief he knew so intimately. But accepting meant acknowledging Kate's generosity, admitting he needed help. Pride and pragmatism warred in his chest as he stared at her hopeful face. There's one more thing, Kate said quietly. I've decided to step back from active management of Morrison Foundation. I'm enrolling in graduate school myself, music education and therapy. I want to do what I was meant to do before life got complicated. Her decision surprised him. You'd give up running a billion-dollar foundation to go back to school? I'd give up everything to have a chance at real happiness, Kate replied, her eyes never leaving his. I'd rather teach children and come home to people I love than rule an empire from an empty penthouse. The choice seemed impossible to Ryan, sacrificing power and prestige for ordinary joy. But Kate's expression suggested she'd already found her answer. What about us? Lily asked, her 8-year-old directness cutting through adult complications. Will we be a family? Like before, but for real this time? Kate looked at Ryan, hope and fear mingling in her eyes. That depends on your father, she said softly. I've made my choice. Now he has to make his. Ryan studied the two people who'd become his world. Kate with her generous heart and complicated past. Lily with her innocent faith in second chances. His pride demanded independence, but love demanded honesty. They needed Kate as much as she needed them. More importantly, they wanted her, not her money or status, but her presence in their lives. Yes, Ryan said simply, the word carrying 3 years of grief and a lifetime of hope. Yes to all of it, to the job, to the future, to us. Kate's smile could have powered the hospital, brilliant with joy and relief. Lily cheered as if her team had won the championship, bouncing in her chair with excitement. There's just one condition, Ryan added, his voice growing serious. Kate's expression grew wary. What condition? She asked. No more secrets, Ryan said firmly. No more hiding who you are or where you come from. If we're going to be family, we need honesty. Kate nodded eagerly. No more secrets, she agreed. Complete transparency from now on. 6 months later, their apartment at Hartford Conservatory felt like the home Ryan had always imagined. The space was modest but comfortable. 2 bedrooms, a living area dominated by the restored Steinway, and a small office where both he and Kate could work. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating sheet music scattered across surfaces and Lily's artwork covering the refrigerator. Ryan's hand had healed better than expected, though complex piano work remained challenging. It didn't matter. His new position teaching music therapy to trauma survivors satisfied him in ways that pure performance never had. He helped veterans process PTSD through improvisation, guided grieving families toward healing through shared melodies, taught children with autism to communicate through rhythm and sound. Kate had transformed too, her designer wardrobe replaced by comfortable teaching clothes, her corporate authority channeled into passionate advocacy for her students. She'd enrolled in a joint master's program, studying both music education and childhood development. Her vast wealth remained, but it no longer defined her. She'd learned to value presence over presence, time over treasure. Their basement apartment had become a workshop where donated instruments found new life. Kate and Ryan taught side by side, their different approaches complementing each other perfectly. She brought academic knowledge and infinite patience. He contributed intuitive understanding and hard-won empathy. Together, they created something neither could have achieved alone. The conservatory students knew their story. The billionaire who'd chosen love over luxury, the widower who'd found his voice again, the little girl who'd helped two wounded adults remember how to trust. But the legend mattered less than the reality. 3 people who'd created family from choice rather than obligation, who'd learned that healing happened through connection. One evening, as spring rain drummed against their windows, Ryan found Kate sitting at the Steinway. She was playing hesitantly, her fingers searching for half-remembered melodies from childhood. The music was simple but heartfelt, filled with the kind of beauty that came from genuine emotion rather than technical perfection. "I haven't played in 15 years," Kate admitted as Ryan joined her on the bench. "I was afraid I'd forgotten how to make music without pain." Ryan's recovered hand found hers on the keys, guiding her through a simple duet he'd been teaching Lily. Their fingers moved together, creating harmony from individual notes. "Music isn't about perfection," Ryan said, echoing words Kate had once spoken to his daughter. "It's about connection, about sharing something true." They played until Lily appeared in her pajamas, drawn by the sound of music floating through their home. She squeezed between them on the bench, her small hands finding space on the keys. The melody became a 3-part conversation, each voice distinct but harmonious. This was their family now, not built on blood or obligation, but on choice and daily commitment to love. The music they created together would never fill concert halls or win prestigious awards, but it filled their home with joy and their hearts with purpose. Later, after Lily had been tucked into bed with stories and kisses, Kate and Ryan sat in comfortable silence. The restored Steinway gleamed in the lamplight, its voice strong and clear again. On top sat a framed photo, Rachel holding baby Lily, her smile bright and encouraging. Beside it, a smaller frame held a picture of Kate's lost son, Michael, his gap-toothed grin forever frozen in time. "Do you think they'd approve?" Kate asked, nodding toward the photographs. Ryan considered the question seriously. Rachel had always wanted him to find happiness again. She'd made him promise, during those final difficult days, not to let grief define the rest of his life. "I think they'd want us to be happy," he said. "I think they'd want us to take care of each other." Kate leaned against his shoulder, her presence warm and solid. "I never thought I'd feel grateful for that heart attack," she murmured. "But it brought me to you. To this." She gestured around the room, encompassing their modest apartment, their shared piano, their sleeping daughter. "I spent years buying things I didn't need to fill spaces that couldn't be filled. And now?" Ryan asked, though he already knew the answer. "Now I know the secret," Kate replied. "Love isn't something you can purchase or earn or deserve. It's something you choose to give and receive. Every day, despite the risk." She was right, Ryan realized. This was what healing looked like. Not grand gestures or dramatic transformations, but simple presence. The choice to stay, to build, to trust again despite the possibility of loss. The rain continued its gentle percussion against the windows, a lullaby for their growing family. In the morning, they'd wake to new challenges, students to teach, healing to facilitate, a life to build together one day at a time. But tonight they simply sat in grateful silence, surrounded by music and memory and the quiet miracle of second chances. Kate's foundation continued its work, but now it felt personal rather than obligatory. She funded music therapy programs across the country, creating opportunities for other broken people to find healing through art. Ryan's expertise guided the initiatives, his understanding of loss and recovery informing every decision. Together, they transformed individual tragedy into collective hope. Their story became legend among conservatory students and faculty, proof that family wasn't about perfection or wealth, but about showing up for each other when it mattered most. They taught by example that love required courage, that healing happened through connection, that second chances were possible for anyone brave enough to risk their heart again. The old Steinway played nightly now, its voice filling their apartment with music that ranged from classical masterpieces to Lily's enthusiastic but imperfect scales. Sometimes Ryan played alone, working through compositions that emerged from joy rather than grief. Sometimes Kate joined him, her skills improving with practice and patience. And sometimes all three crowded onto the bench, creating beautiful chaos that somehow resolved into harmony. This was their symphony. Not the grand performance Ryan had once imagined, but something better. A daily composition of small kindnesses, shared dreams, and the revolutionary act of choosing to love again. The music they made together would never win awards or achieve fame, but it accomplished something more important. It proved that broken people could heal each other, that love could triumph over loss, that family was created through choice rather than circumstance. In the end, Ryan understood that Kate's wealth had been irrelevant. What mattered was her willingness to risk everything for the chance to be truly seen, truly known, truly loved. She'd taught him that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. And he'd shown her that worthiness wasn't measured in dollars or achievements, but in the simple act of opening your heart to another person. Their love story would never make headlines or inspire movies. It was too quiet, too ordinary, too real. But it was theirs, built on honesty, sustained by choice, and enriched by the daily miracle of three people choosing to heal together. And in their modest apartment, surrounded by rescued instruments and restored dreams, they'd found something rarer than wealth. They'd found home,